Hi, I'm Claire Peterson, and today I'm going to teach you how to create some beautiful self-portraits using your DSLR or using a camera phone. So how am I well versed in self-portrait photography in particular? Well, not only am I a fashion and lifestyle photographer, but also I'm a really avid Instagrammer and blogger. So I'm always taking self-portraits for my own blog and Instagram and sharing them. You can find me at by Claire P. Feel free to get some inspiration from there and follow along. So why should you follow along with this class? Well, if you're any sort of blogger or Instagrammer, it's not always convenient to hire a photographer. You might not always have the funds, and sometimes you can't get a friend to help. You don't want to always be bothering your friend or even your boyfriend to take your photographs. So sometimes you just need to work with yourself and create your own self-portraits. So you might want to know how to take your self-portraits so you can keep your blog and your Instagram really fresh with content. Or another reason could be that you're just really interested in photography and you just want to learn the skills of photography and really up your photography game. You might not always be able to grab a friend to take photos of. Sometimes the best person to practice on is yourself. You can literally spend as long as you want to on the photographs, experiment with settings, experiment with different poses, and again, you're not going to be annoying anyone. You can spend as long as you want if you yourself are the subject of your photos. Self-portraiture is a really great way to get to grips with your camera, and you'll really start to up your skills in photography just by taking photos of yourself. Throughout this class, I'm going to be sharing my tips for getting the best self-portraits you can. I'll also be sharing 4 different fun self-portrait ideas, and finally I'll be giving a little insight into my editing process. So let's get on with the first lesson. First up, what you will need. Let's take a moment to check that we have everything we need to create some beautiful self-portraits. The first thing you will of course need is some sort of camera. So DSLRs are great. You might not have one, but perhaps you have a friend who you could borrow one from, or a family member. If you can get your hands on a DSLR, that could be great because of course the quality is really good and it would be great for you to give it a go and try and up your photography skills. But all that said, you don't need a DSLR. You could quite easily use the camera on your phone. Next, you'll need a way of editing your photos. So if you're using a DSLR, you'll probably want to edit your photos on a computer or a laptop. So you can download a free trial of Lightroom and Photoshop from the Adobe website. That's personally what I use to edit, and I'll be showing you a little bit of that edit later on. If you're taking photos on your phone, there are loads of free editing apps. Personally, I use Visco. So beyond the camera and editing software, everything else is optional. You could get a tripod. I would call a tripod technically optional because you can balance your camera or your phone on a stack of books or on a table to try and get the shot you want to get. But of course, having a tripod will make your life a little bit easier. So if you happen to have one, or if you think you want to invest, then it is a great thing to use as a self-portrait artist. And the last piece of equipment that I recommend is a remote control shutter. You can definitely get by without one because most cameras obviously have a self-timer, but it is handy to be able to get into position and simply click a button to focus instead of having to walk back and forth from the position that you're in to the camera and trying to get the focus in kind of that awkward situation. So I've done a little checklist of what you need to begin. So feel free to screenshot this and tick it off as you go. And of course, like I said, a lot of these things are optional, but if you do have them, that's great. So we know what you need. Let's move on to the next class. Before you start snapping your photos, you're going to want to ask yourself, why? What is your purpose for taking these photos? Why are you doing it? Because it's really going to have an effect on how many photos you need to take, how long you should work on it, the different kinds of photos you should take, the different angles. All of this is wrapped up into why you are bothering to take these photos at all. So ask yourself, what is the purpose? Maybe you're a blogger and you have a piece of clothing that you want to take photos of to show how you would style it. Or perhaps you are a photographer and you're looking to do some creative self-portraits, so it's more of a completely creative pursuit. Whatever it is, just make sure you note it down and get really clear on your purpose of taking these photos. So once it's clear in your mind, you're going to want to actually write down the different kinds of photos you need to take. So basically it's a shot list. You make sure you take all the photos you need. And you can go through this as you're actually taking the photos and tick every kind of photo off as you take them to make sure that you don't miss anything. Knowing your purpose is going to help you understand how many photos to take, what kind of shots to get, and even could make a difference in how you edit them. For instance, you're a blogger and you're looking to take photographs of an outfit that a clothing company sent you. So for this, you're going to need a lot of different kinds of photos. So you're going to need some full-length photos that show off the whole outfit and how you've styled it. You might also need some detail shots, perhaps of the shoes or of an accessory. And you might just need some close-up shots of your own face. Now compare that if you're just looking to do a creative self-portrait that you're going to be sharing on Instagram. In this instance, most of the photos you take will be just in portrait because those are the kind of photos that work best on an Instagram feed. Maybe you just have one or two photos in mind from a similar angle because you're just getting creative and you're not worrying about showing off the clothes necessarily. So again, it really depends what the purpose of these photos is. Once you've got the purpose crystal clear in your mind, it's time to move on to the styling. Even if you're not a fashion blogger, this is still an important step because it's still a big element of your photograph will be what you're wearing. So let's move on to that. So at this stage, you've already considered your reasoning for taking the photos. So this is going to inform how your photos should look, and it will inform maybe if you should wear makeup or if you're not going to bother with makeup, and of course what you're going to wear and how you're going to style your outfit. Okay, so for example, if you're taking photos for your LinkedIn, these are going to be very different to the photos you take for your Instagram. Because with LinkedIn, you might want to wear neutral colors and maybe a somewhat formal outfit. Whereas Instagram, you can go wild with whatever your personal style is. If you're even just taking self-portraits for your portfolio or just to practice with self-portraiture, then you should think about the feeling you want to evoke from the viewer. And with this in mind, you can style your look around that. So if you're doing a moody photo, perhaps you'll be wearing a dark black dress or some sort of vintage outfit. Or of course, if you're doing a fun, happy photo, then maybe you'll wear bright colors, maybe summery clothes. So these are of course quite generic examples, but you yourself will know the photo that you're trying to capture, you'll know the feeling you want to evoke, and you'll know your own wardrobe and what you have to work with, and you'll start seeing outfits that work. So sometimes I won't know what I want the photo to look like at the end, but I will know that I want kind of pastel colours, for example. So then I just start choosing pastel kind of outfits from my wardrobe, and from that I start developing an idea for the final photo. So whatever you're shooting, you probably don't need to go out and buy a whole new look. Try to use what you already have in your wardrobe. And remember, this is a self-portrait that you're shooting, so you can be flexible. So if you're not sure what shoes to wear or what top works, then bring a few of them with you to your shoot location. And as you take your photos, you can always switch parts of the outfit. Seeing the photos on your camera may make you change your mind about what works, so having a few options is good. So my next tip is to choose a prop to work into your photo in some way. This might not work for every kind of self-portrait, but there are many benefits to using a prop if it makes sense in your photo. So props are great if you're not used to posing, because you might have this feeling and this thought of, what do I do with my hands? With a prop, you can play with that item in the photo, and instantly you'll start feeling much more relaxed in front of the camera, and you'll naturally use your hands to hold the prop. So one I've done a lot in the past is a bouquet of flowers. Instantly, you've got something to hold and look at and maybe pick off a petal, and you can hold it in different positions with one hand, with both hands. So you can see some of these photos here that I've taken with flowers. They gave me something to work with. And also a prop can of course help you tell a story. So say you're taking photos for your blog and it's about your favourite stationery. Well, instead of just including different flat lays and product shots of the notebooks, you could also do a self-portrait of you holding them, flicking through them, writing in the notebooks. These props are going to help you tell a story in some way. And a prop can add a bit of interest and intrigue into your photo. So if you're going to incorporate props, bring a selection of different props and try a few of them. It's all about experimenting and seeing what works. That's the beauty of digital photography. You can take as many photos as you want and discard the ones that you don't like. And also it's self-portrait photography, so no one is going to be judging you. That's why I love this kind of photography. Right, so now let's get on to the setup. Okay, we're getting close to actually taking your self-portraits. There's been a lot of preparation, but I think that's what you need to do to get the most out of your self-portrait sessions. Anyway, we're on to the next step, which is the setup. And as I've said before, you can take your photos with a DSLR or whatever you have access to is fine. This is what a typical setup of mine looks like when I'm using my Canon to take photos. So as you can see, I've got my Canon 6D standing here on a tripod that you can flip the viewfinder around so you can see it from in front, which is common on a lot of cameras now. The Canon 6D has this feature where you can sync it up to your phone. So I use my phone as the remote. But if you don't have this feature, you can of course buy a remote control shutter for your camera. Otherwise, you can also use a self-timer function. So we'll be talking about both of these. So you've seen how I set up my camera, but also I could potentially set up my phone. As you can see, this is a sort of precarious position. I've got my mobile phone balancing on a tripod, but you can buy particular tripods that actually hold your phone, or you can get attachments for your regular tripod to also hold your phone. And if you don't even have a tripod, of course, don't worry. You can always just balance your phone on a chair or balance it on a table, whatever works. So now I'm going to show you how you use a remote control shutter. In this case, the remote control is my phone. But if you don't have a camera with this capabilities, you can of course use a remote control shutter that goes on top of your camera and connects to it. And you can find these from Amazon or from a camera store. So with a remote control shutter, it's very simple. So you just want to make sure that your settings are on some sort of timer. So even though you can take the photo holding the remote, it's probably better if you give yourself a 2-second timer so that you can press down on the shutter and then throw away the remote control onto a soft spot. So then it's out of the shot, giving me some more seconds to get into my position. So I have it set up to have a 10-second delay and then take 10 photos. So for me, I just like to take as many as possible because I can be pretty particular with what kind of face that I like and what pose. So it's up to you how many. You can also, of course, just have a 2-second timer to take one photo. Whatever works for you. So this is the way to focus using a remote control shutter. It is the easiest way to focus if you're doing a self-portrait. But of course, if you don't have a remote control shutter, you can also focus in a different way. The easiest way to do it without a remote control is to grab a friend and put them in the position that you will be sitting in. Then you can focus it using your camera. You can have this in autofocus at this stage. And then once you're happy with their positioning, then you switch your camera to manual focus. So this means it won't go out of focus when you hit the button again. And then, of course, ask your friend to leave the spot and maybe leave the room if you're feeling self-conscious. Make sure the camera is on self-timer and then get yourself into the same position they were in. Then when the shutter finally goes, you will be in the right position and that will be a self-portrait you've just taken. But of course, you might be doing this completely in the privacy of your own space and you don't want to get anyone else involved. So that's fine, but it does make it a little bit more tricky again to take the photo. In this case, you will want to position something, perhaps a chair or a pillow or anything really, and you're going to put this in the frame where you will then take its place. So again, it's just like focusing on a person, but this time you're focusing on a thing that you're then going to move out of the frame and then take the place of. Say for instance, you have a chair that you can use to focus. So you put the chair in the position, you focus using autofocus, and then you can take out the chair, switch your camera to manual focus so that the next time you press the shutter, the focus is going to remain where you've already set it, and then you sit down in the position that you focused on. So as you can tell, it's getting a bit more complicated, but it's still very doable, and I have done it this way myself before I had the remote control. Of course, all of this is applicable also to mobile phone photography. You'll want to use the self-timer function. Focusing can be less of an issue when it comes to mobile phone photography because it has a narrower aperture, so it's not going to have that blurred background. In this case, you might just set the self-timer and then stand in frame, and you probably will be in focus, so have a play around with it. But if you need to take those earlier focusing tips into account, then of course do so.